more a lot on this podcast, and I wanted to set this up a little bit, right? Because you and I often on this podcast, we will say how much we were personally inspired by Michael Moore. I loved his films, and to be honest, I don't think I would have ever thought like about politics and doing the Vanguard and all of these things in the same way if I hadn't been personally inspired and entertained and moved by films like Roger and Me, like Bowling for Columbine, like Capitalism, a Love Story, like Sicko. All of his, a lot of his like really like his prime age, or I mean, he's Fahrenheit 9/11. Like those first 4 or 5 movies, those are damn good. And he really did something important, which was he made documentary films from a leftist perspective that were fucking entertaining, man. They were good, and they would change your mind, and they were funny. And they were gripping, and you weren't bored. And it wasn't like you were going and sitting in your classroom when you were in high school and your teacher wasn't there, so you watched this like dumb VHS tape. No, it was like, oh, I want to spend, $15 a ticket and take my date and go watch this because it's entertaining and we'll be thoughtful and she'll think I'm smart. So he got into that niche market, and he won a Palme d'Or for a documentary, and he definitely shattered the record for the box office for documentary films, but I think he was even #1 at the box office for the first time as a documentary film. So, I mean, these are all things that he did that was like really important. And I want to just say that right now, because we do defend him a lot on the podcast. We give him benefit of the doubt. He went to bat and put his name all over and bankrolled Planet of the Humans, the Jeff Gibbs film, which is often referred to as a Michael Moore film. But to reserve credit for Jeff Gibbs, he's the filmmaker. Michael Moore only produced the film. And doing good things like that. That was a film that, took clear shots at the phony environmentalists, right? That was important. It would not have gotten the attention or the pushback had it not been attached to Michael Moore's name. He was opposed to the war when it was incredibly unpopular to be so. So this is a guy who he predicted the Trump election. Okay, so he's been right so many times that it is a bummer when you see him like just face plant, right? Just put out a bad take. So we can put the tweet up.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that a little bit, another reason why Michael Moore has always been a voice that I look to and trust is that even as he has achieved, prominence and celebrity, and even as he makes his rounds on the MSNBC circuit, for example, he always kind of, remains, or at least seems to remain in touch with kind of the working class, more rural, disaffected parts of this country. He's never left his hometown community of Flint, Michigan, which obviously was recently, just decimated by this water crisis, which he's actually been one of the leading voices in the nation.
Yeah, which is why this is crazy, right? Because
it's crazy.
First,
yeah, it's crazy because he has spent so much time talking about Flint, and obviously the Flint water crisis was the direct result of bad, corrupt government.
Yeah, Rick Snyder. Fuck Rick Snyder, the governor of Michigan. And it's like, okay, should we be like, fuck the people of Flint because Rick Snyder was a piece of shit? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And what happened in Texas is very similar to what happened in Flint, and that it's the result of this corporate, privatization and corruption of our, leading governmental officials that leads to actual human suffering and real endangerment of human lives, whether it's in the form of an electrical grid not being able to, face a winter storm, or, switching the pipe to a different source because it's cheaper. At the end of the day, the problem is the same. The profit motive, the capitalism, essentially, just to boil it down. And Michael Moore's been, pretty clear in his diagnosis of that problem up to this point. I thought, he's called out capitalism where capitalism is clearly the problem. He's been, unique in that aspect, and the fact that he is one of the few people that'll go on MSNBC and use that kind of language. And obviously he was one of the surrogates for Bernie Sanders, and he made some really powerful speeches that were really rooted in leftist values, as his career has been. So it's really unfortunate now to see him here in this tweet about Texas, where he says, "Texas, we hear you. You didn't want to be part of our electrical grid. Now you've removed your mask mandate and are allowing large crowds to gather. We hear you. COVID is a hoax, so you don't need our precious vaccine. We'll send it to the people who are saving lives by wearing masks." Again, kind of just implicating all of Texas and all of its residents. By the way, one of the largest Latino, states in the country, has one of the largest Black populations in the country. It's not like everyone in Texas is Ted Cruz and Rick Perry, sitting around without their masks on, smoking cigars and, drinking whiskey. Like, this is a state full of working class people that are unfortunately at the whim of their violent corporate corrupt government and governor and all these people that are basically just trying to virtue signal to the right-wing culture war issue by reopening the state, by removing the mask mandate, and also by refusing to properly regulate their grid. So it's crazy, and it's so fucking tone deaf.
Yeah, and
again,
it's kind of it makes me angry, right? Because look, here's the thing that I've always rooted my defense of Michael Moore in. I've always thought his heart was in the right place. I always thought that when he was waving around, talking, like freaking out about Trump, like he was doing it because he was genuinely afraid that this fascism was going to take over, and and he didn't want that, and he was worried, and he was, as I think somebody in the comment section I saw, he kind of humanized a lot of Trump voters, and he tried to. I don't know. It's always like a bummer when you see somebody who goes from being like a really heart of gold guy who you would expect to be the kind of person that's making the opposite point there. The kind of guy who you would expect to be like, hey, millions of people live in Texas, just like Marianne Williamson points out, like millions of other Texans, they neither voted Republican nor agree with their agenda. There's no monolithic Texas. There's also a large number of minorities in Texas that don't even have the fucking right to vote. So let's not forget about those people. Voting is a privilege in America, right? That we don't give to a lot of the people who live in our country. Okay, so if you've been convicted of a crime or you're first generation and you're not a US citizen or what the fuck else, hurdle that they put in your way, if you're trying to vote and participate in the democracy that we're supposed to be provided as our inalienable birthright. So I would like to see him apologize for this.